Welcome to the Extinction Level Event Podcast, Apocalypse Edition. I am your host, the Barrelman. So I was on YouTube, scrolling through, or doom scrolling, I guess is as they call it nowadays. But mostly I was looking for other people, other channels that do something maybe similar to what I do. And what I've seen is there are definitely a lot of climate change specific websites, but not anybody who does in general what I do without sort of being on the conspiracy level of things, if you know what I mean. I guess this topic is easily manipulatable by conspiracy theorists, and due to that fact, we're going to get a lot of conspiracy people using this topic to further their own agendas, to start coloring some of the actual facts with opinion, to start misstating things that are actually not true, as opposed to sticking to the science and the facts because it's not fun and exciting enough to get them, a billion views or whatever. And they just want something that's as clickbaity as possible. Like I saw the other day, somebody that I follow on a site called The Space Race, which seems like a good channel overall. They seem to have a lot of good information, a lot of historical fact that they put into their videos, that gives a good trajectory for events and why things are happening, which I really appreciate. But then they put out a video that shows like an asteroid coming and saying something like, do we have to be afraid of this? Which just in and of itself is a leading question. It isn't, let's talk about this topic, or is this dangerous? It's, do we have to be afraid of this? Or however they put it. It was something similar to that. And it's just like, okay. I went into the comments because I'm like, I'm just going to find out what this is about without, I clicked on it, so they probably got the view. I don't care. It's not a big deal. But I didn't want to give them the watch time for such a clickbaity thing. I just wanted to see, and they were all in the chats talking about Apophis and, that asteroid that could or could not hit Earth at this point in time and that point in time. And even though we've calculated it's probably not going to do it for, like over 100 years, it's still, do we have to be afraid of this? And it shows the asteroid, and it doesn't anywhere say in the future or at some point. So really about as clickbaity as you can get for something like that. And every once in a while they seem to do something of that sort, and it's really kind of, it's not good for their reputation of trying to be somebody who actually gives a lot of good information, to then talk about stupid crap like that. And it wasn't, like I said, even in the context of like, hey, we talk about space a lot, even though it's mostly, talking about rockets and just actual habitation of the moon, Mars, and those kinds of plans that are out there. In general, space and space flight related. Instead, it was, just, clickbait. And so, stuff like that's a bit disheartening, especially from people that you're like, oh yeah, I think this might actually be a decent. It's hard. It's difficult to find good channels anymore that are actually, they stay true to what they're doing and don't get all hyperbolic because everybody's on the money train, right? They do it and they're like, I'm going to make money doing this, not I'm doing it because I enjoy it and I want to get the information out. Now, there's no problem with people who can make money doing it, making money doing it. Not at all. If the Joker says, if you're good at something, never do it for free, right? So if you can, and I'm not saying I'm saying that, because I'm obviously doing this for free. I'm not saying I'm good at it, so, I guess there's that as well. But the point is, I can completely understand if somebody like the Space Race, and they're just an example. This isn't, to just like slam the Space Race or something like that, because in general, I enjoy their videos. Like I said, they have a lot of really good information, a lot of history. Like, I don't want to give a percentage because I haven't been watching them that long, but it seems like a high percentage of their stuff is just good quality stuff. And even within their videos, you could tell there's a little bias sometimes one way or the other. The facts are still the facts, and they give those, and I appreciate that, right? But the fact is that if somebody like that is looking at their views and their money and determining how much they have to be a YouTuber and only a YouTuber, and or they want to switch over to be just a YouTuber and they're trying to just ask people to give them money, and sometimes you hear these people make threats, which is just horrifying. It's like, hey, if you don't give me money, then this channel's not going to go away and I won't be able to do this anymore. And it's just like, Jesus, dude, seriously, settle down. Even if that is true, which it absolutely isn't, the quality could go down. The number of, pieces of content you could put up on the regular might go down, but you could still do it. Nobody stops you except for you. YouTube isn't charging you. You don't have to pay for this. You can do it for free. If you refuse to do it for free, and that's fine, I'm not angry about it, at least be honest and say, look, I'm not going to do this for free. I don't actually enjoy doing it if I'm not getting paid. And I'm like, you know what? More power to you, man. More power to you. And again, this is not about that one channel. I'm saying in general, I've seen a lot of channels like that, right? And I haven't specifically even seen the Space Race channel even like begging for contributions and stuff. Like they'll always like mention Patreon and stuff. That's not a big deal, saying, hey, I have stuff. If you want to contribute, go ahead. And I think they're usually pretty laid back. Again, this isn't about them. I just brought them up as an example for a few specific things. But in general, there's a lot of begging and pleading and, oh my God, woe is me kind of stuff. And it's like, you painted yourselves in this corner when your views went from like, I don't know, 10,000 to like a 500,000 all of a sudden. And you're like, oh my God, I can do this for a living. Like, really? You don't know how fickle the algorithm is. You don't know how fickle people are. You don't think, oh, this is great. Let me keep doing what I am. Let me get out of this what I can, but let me not put myself into a position where I have to sustain this level because this level isn't going to sustain itself. That's not very reasonable. So I didn't really come on here to rag about that. I'm talking about that as a part of a broader point here. And one of the points was because, like I said, I was looking through YouTube, watching videos, doom scrolling, if you will. And another one I came across, which to me had a lot of potential. They were talking about good topics, and their whole channel is called, I think it's Climate Emergency Forums. And the channels looked a little podcasty, but I've seen a lot of ones that kind of look that way, but still had some really good content. And you go there and they show you like videos and talk about topics and do all this stuff. And I thought, oh, well, that's great. Climate emergency forums. That sounds like it's for me, man. Like I said, I do a lot more than just climate change, but climate change is a huge one, man. It's just, in our face. Nothing else really even matters if climate change happens because we won't give anything else enough time to happen. The only other thing that could be more pressing would be World War III because we could nuke ourselves tomorrow. And climate change is going to take a little bit of time to wipe us out, Not a lot of time. Certainly not as much time as people are saying it's going to. But definitely more time than a nuke would. But, there isn't a whole lot we can do as far as World War III goes. Obviously, we'll talk about anything like that when it comes up as far as pressing concerns. But, climate change is a big one. So climate change is definitely something I pay attention to a lot. Like I said, it's not my exclusive thing, but that doesn't make it not a major component and something that comes up a lot and is, a point of conversation. So I was watching, and I watched the guy, and it's one thing because I do something similar here that he did. The big difference was he was doing it kind of live, and I edit my stuff. So even though I could spend, 5 minutes or so, it's usually not 5 minutes, but some time looking at a page trying to find what the hell I'm looking for, I'll, for the most part, especially if I catch it, sometimes I'm listening, reviewing this stuff and editing it to put it up, and I don't catch it for whatever reason. Sometimes I'm distracted, I'm trying to play a game at the same time or whatever. But if I catch it, I will edit that stuff out. And this guy was doing it. It wasn't, I don't know if it was live at the time or he just recorded it, stream of conscious, just he records it live, doesn't edit, and just throws it up. But he's scrolling through these pages going, oh, I wonder about this, and oh, I didn't get that, and blah, blah, blah. And literally taking the time to look through a whole paper for something he was looking for. Sometimes he finds it, and I'm thinking, this is it? I'm watching you supposedly give me all this really great information, and you don't even know where that information is, and you're getting it from a paper from somebody else. So it's over, because it's one thing if you're just aggregating information and just giving us good information. It's another thing if you're projecting that you're a member of, that you're somebody who has a degree or some sort of inside track, that you're an expert or a reliable source. If you're saying that, I expect more than I'm looking through somebody else's page, don't understand half the stuff, and can't find what I'm looking for. That doesn't say a lot of good stuff. But I'm like, okay, whatever. This is like an off day. This is the only video I've ever seen of the guy. So I watched another one, and he went to COP29. I think kids are playing in the yard or something. Dogs getting all antsy. So he goes to COP29, and I'm thinking, wow, I didn't get invited to COP29. I couldn't afford to go even if I did. This guy might be as important as he's saying he is. And so I'm watching this, because he was talking about that in the one he was scrolling through, which is half of why I was like, okay, I get it. You're about to go to this big convention. You're not putting a ton of time and effort in this. You just want to get something up. It's a little, on the not great side. I just want to have content he'd make money off of, and get views and all that. So I'm going to put out any slop because I'm going to this convention, or as opposed to just not putting anything, or just a short little video that says, hey, I don't have a lot of time. I'm going to such and such convention. I'll get you more great information once I get there. Absolutely, would be a great video. But they get there, and they're sitting down, and they're talking with this guy. I don't know who he was. I'm sure somebody knows who he is. I'm sure somebody could let me know who he is, and they were having this conversation about methane swaps. They were talking about, methane swaps, like carbon swap. And they were talking about this like it's some emerging market that they're coming up with. Like carbon swaps are already a big thing. It looks like, from what I've looked up, methane swaps aren't exactly brand new, but they're definitely not like big and in the public eye like carbon is. So, they were talking about this like this is some innovative thing, and they're this is like the future, and we're going to start doing this and start our carbon swaps. And I just thought, there's no way I can watch this guy's channel anymore. This is horrifying that you're giving somebody here talking about methane swap. And he wasn't challenging him on anything. He was like, oh, yeah, okay, no, that's like great idea. Or I don't think he ever said this is a great idea, but he was definitely playing very nicey footsie with this guy and just, and what are your plans for this? And, kind of thing, which is basically a green light, essentially, in my book, that he's giving this guy for talking about this crap. And really talking about these swaps and making it sound like, well, this is great. We're now addressing methane. And I just thought, what are you talking about? What in the hell is going on here? Why are you giving this guy a platform? And why aren't you, at least, if you're giving him a platform, which, just briefly, you can give anybody a platform you want, and you can, like people bitch about Joe Rogan and Donald Trump, and it's like I don't care that Donald Trump is on there. People are bitching about Cenk Uygur from TYT going on conservative talk shows and saying that that was a big deal. None of those things are big deals. The big deal isn't that you give them the space. The big deal is that you give them the space and then play patty cakes. You don't challenge them on these things. I don't care that Cenk went on a bunch of right wing things, but when he goes on there and he starts being like, yeah, right wing guys, you're talking sense. I agree with a lot of the stuff you're saying, and not challenging them enough. Or when they do challenge them, they challenge them from such an extreme other side that you can't find the common ground to try to make an actual conversation. So when you combine all these things, it's just like, okay, it's not the platforming that is the problem. It is what you do with that platform once you give it to somebody. And now that's the problem. And so, yes, to me, it was like, well, why are you giving this guy a platform? But beyond why are you giving him a platform, look what's happening with the guy now that you've given him that platform. And so that's, to me, is the big issue. So I thought, okay, we need to do an episode on these swaps. All right. It's going to be mostly centered around carbon swaps because those are the ones we have the most information on. Like I said, from what I'm reading, methane swaps are not new, but they are not as big and popular. So there isn't as much information, and they're not as big of a deal as the carbon swaps are, which are already a big deal and we have so much information on. So I've got some articles. We're going to take a look at some information on swaps in general, but like I said, some of it will be carbon swap specific. But the point is still the same. The swaps are the swaps, and the problems with swaps in general is the issue at hand. All right? Because in case you couldn't tell by my general manner, they're a joke. They're a scam. Carbon swaps will solve nothing. No emission swaps are going to solve anything. Even if all the players were 100% honest, this is just a Band-Aid to say, okay, you can do all the bad stuff that's going to create other bad stuff, but we'll plant like some trees and then everything will be okay. Because I'm sure the only reason that the thing is bad is because you created carbon and not all the things the carbon does once it's up there. And that if we just, plant a few trees, everything's going to be great. And that's just not the way things work. So, beyond the fact that even if carbon swaps work perfectly, they're still a joke. The problem is they're not working perfectly. And so we are going to talk about these emission swaps today. This is all due to something called the Kyoto Protocol. And this was part of the Paris Climate Accords. So this is from the United Nations Climate Change, is UNFCCC.int. So this is the website that this particular thing is from. It's mechanisms under the Kyoto Protocol, under the subheading the Kyoto Protocol, under the subheading process and meetings. So just to give you a little bit of, chain of custody of this information, if you will. So it's emissions trading. So yeah, and just to let you know, trying to narrow down this information rather than get general summaries, even on the official pages, is quite, it's quite the journey to try to find this. For example, trying to find, here it'll mention in a minute, but Annex B parties, talking about the countries that are part of Annex B, because they're Annex 1 and Annex B, and I tried to look up what those countries. So who's part of the Annex A parties, who's part of the Annex B party. Could not find that information out. So trying to parse through and gather the relevant information for any of this was wasn't easy to do if you're looking for something specific and not just generalities of what these, the definition of this is or the summary of that is. So trying to find the actual information itself has been somewhat daunting, I should say. So let's just go over this on this sort of official website here. And this is just a few paragraphs. It talks about the emissions trading in general. And even though I'm pretty sure this is what they would call an abstract, so not exactly, detailed information. Parties with commitments under the Kyoto Protocol, Annex B parties, have accepted targets for limiting or reducing emissions. These targets are expressed as levels of allowed emissions or assigned amounts at over the 2008-2012 commitment period. Gotcha. Now this is an old one, huh? The allowed emissions are divided into assigned amount units, or AAUs. Emissions trading, see, here's the important part, I guess. Emissions trading, as set out in Article 17 of the Kyoto Protocol, allows countries that have emission units to spare emissions permitted them but not, quote unquote, used to sell the excess capacity to countries that are over their targets. Thus, a new commodity was created in the form of emission reductions or removals. Since carbon dioxide is the principal greenhouse gas, people speak simply of trading in carbon. Carbon is now tracked and traded like any other commodity. This is known as the quote unquote carbon market. Other trading units in the carbon market. More than actual emission units can be traded and sold under the Kyoto Protocol's emissions trading scheme. They called it a scheme. The other units, which may be transferred under the scheme, each equal to 1 ton of CO2, may be in the form of a removal unit, or RMU, an emissions reduction unit, an ERU, or a certified emissions reduction, CER. Transfers and acquisitions of these units are tracked and recorded through the registry systems under the Kyoto Protocol. An international transaction log ensures secure transfer of emissions reduction units between countries. So, I looked up the registry system, and I don't know if I have it in here or not, because it's another one of those things where you try to dig into it and they make it as difficult as possible to try to find out what exactly is going on. So it seems like different countries have a registry, but then there are other registries within those countries, and then there could be other registries that answer to that registry and then report to the. So this can be several layers deep, which creates lots of opportunity for corruption to kind of enter the system. Not to say a single unit couldn't also offer the opportunity for corruption, but it also offers opportunity for, you know, accountability. Because when there's so much out there diluted, it's hard to hold any person accountable. When you have the one place in the one spot and you know that's where the corruption is, it's easy to hold that position, that person accountable. So that's kind of the benefit of that. Even though corruption is possible on all levels, although it's a lot easier, I should say it's a lot easier for low level schemers to corrupt when it's so dispersed. It's easy, but you have to be at a very high level to be able to get away with it, which involves a lot of coordination and being in a conspiracy essentially is what you'd have to do. But you'd really have to get a bunch of people on board with that conspiracy in order to pull it up on the top level. It really says a ton of stuff about whatever it is you're doing, that it can be so easily corrupted. So that's not really great anyways, But when you do it this way, it doesn't say anything. You just basically make it so easy to corrupt that, I mean, what else was going to happen, really? So, there are links here which you can click on. Like, I clicked on registry systems, and it's just a short definition of basically what registry systems are. I don't want to know what registry systems are. I know what they are. I want to see the registries. I want to see who has them, at least, or a way to be able to track them and hold these systems accountable. But when I try to fish further to see where these were, or who had them, or how we could hold these groups accountable by checking them, I was unable to do so. This information exists. It's not like, hey, nobody can get to it, blah, blah, blah. Somebody can get to it for sure. People have written news articles on this stuff because people have been able to get this information and see who's on it and try to hold them accountable and stuff. It's not non existent, but it certainly is not very easy to get a hold of, especially if you're just going to do like a real quick podcast and talk about this stuff. So, it makes it a little difficult to really kind of get into. So, there is something more. It's Red Plus, REDD Plus. And so I didn't give the context as to why this is important in this particular page. This is more the what is Red Plus Plus, and so I looked it up. But it kind of makes more sense to kind of get into what it is before we really talk about why it's important anyway. So this isn't a horrible, order of events. What is REDD plus? So, protecting the world's forests is crucial for the climate. Forests absorb vast amounts of carbon dioxide and can be a source of greenhouse gas emissions when destroyed or damaged. Countries establish the REDD plus framework. I'll just call it Red Plus, but I just, for anybody who's looking into it or interested, it isn't just RED plus. So, and it's not the word plus; it's actually the plus in it's the plus you learned in basic elementary school math. So, all right, establishes the Red Plus Framework Project Force as part of the Paris Agreement. RED stands for Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation in Developing Countries. The Plus stands for Additional Forest-related Activities that protect the climate, namely sustainable management of forests and the conservation enhancement of forest carbon stocks. Under the framework with these REDD plus activities, developing countries can receive results-based payments for emission reductions when they reduce deforestation. This serves as a major incentive for their efforts. So essentially, they are paying countries to do nothing. Is it good to pay a country to do nothing? Of course it is. If the nothing is cutting down their vital resources and their forests, the problem is that certain agencies can now lay claim over what might even be disputed lands, and then everybody can say, hey, I'm not chopping down these trees, give me a lot of money. And so it's real easy to kind of, wiggle your way in there, pretend you're doing something by not doing anything, accomplishing that goal because you are doing nothing, and then get paid for that. All right, so let's look at this. What is this? Okay. The Kyoto Protocol, Article 3. So, Article 3 of the Kyoto Protocol of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change has several key components. Emissions reductions goal, progress reporting, land use change, minimizing adverse impacts, and reporting requirements. The Kyoto Protocol was established three flexible mechanics that Annex 1 parties can use to meet their emission reductions commitments. So essentially, Article 3 is just the road, and it's brought up. So it's one of those, okay, now I know what they were talking about when they bring it up. But it's basically laying out the framework of the whole point of the Paris Climate Accords. You know, it's saying, hey, we are going to reduce things. This is what we're going to reduce. This is, what we're talking about. So they talk about, for instance, Article 17 in relation to Article 13, which is to say, we're using these carbon swaps in relation of how it helps us meet our goals that we have established in Article 3. So it's important because when we're talking about these things, it's one of those, you get into the article, you get in to talk about these things, and all suddenly they're just saying a bunch of stuff and you have no idea what they're talking about. So you get lost in the meaning because the meaning becomes irrelevant when most of the stuff they're saying has no, real context to you. Like you have no idea what they're talking about. When people start bringing up articles and, like subheadings and all this stuff, if you don't know what they're talking about, if you have no frame of reference on these things, it doesn't mean anything. So when I say, hey, they're using this article to do this and it relates to that and stuff, it might sound like a big deal. It might sound like nothing. Who the hell knows? So I'm trying to give you just a little bit of information on what these are specifically. So when we talk about them in the context of, hey, this is why this crap is shady, you'll be like, oh, okay, I get it. Now it makes sense why we went over that, and it's a little bit of information that's in there that you can kind of just use to understand rather than have to like go back in and dig through just to make sense of any of it at all. So it's nice to have that. And we're going to look at an article by The Guardian called Kyoto Protocol's Carbon Credit Scheme Increased Emissions by 600 million tons. So, okay, I had a spot here kind of picked out. I got to let this stupid thing load, but so this is somebody called Vladislav Zahirin, apparently an author of the report that they're referring to. Um, parts of which were published on Monday in Nature Climate Change. So, and they said many of them talking about the companies doing the carbon swaps didn't observe the requirements of JI. I don't know if it says what J. Oh, a joint inter implement. Okay, joint implementation scheme. So in other words, it's saying the rules and regulations for carbon swapping is what's this talking about. The JI is part of the rules and regulations for the carbon swap that have been set up. It says many of them did not observe the requirements of JI on additionally, as they would probably have happened anyway. And I would even doubt the physical existence of some of these projects. I would say many of them were fake. So we're talking about the carbon swaps and the things that people are paying for, saying, hey, it doesn't matter that we're polluting because somebody else is, doing the opposite and taking the carbon back out or doing something to make sure that carbon, gets put away or some other way balanced. I mean, you really can't balance putting carbon in without taking carbon out. So, you grow more trees or something like that. It has to be in service of because those trees will take that carbon back out. But so this is saying right here that it's pretty false. So it says that the JI or basically the rules of carbon swapping that they set up have been beset by significant criminal energy in Russia and Ukraine. Hold on a minute. This is, let's say, August 2015. So this is before the war. So this is, before Russia and Ukraine, that whole war became like a thing. Heck, this is before the pandemic even. So, so see, it was an outstretched middle finger to the European Union saying, "You're shutting out our credits. We're flooding your markets." A mix of retaliation and crime. So the JI, again, that's the rules and regulations there, increasingly came to be seen by market participants there as a corruption mechanism. So, I mean, we can go on. I don't really want to just like read through the whole article. Um, let's see. More than half of the JI carbon credits went to projects to staunch the spontaneous ignition of coal piles, mostly in Ukraine. Country estimates that such waste piles produce roughly 30% of its coal was highly unrealistic and probably led to substantial overcrediting. The report found that only one of the six major projects types in the JI system reduced emissions by more than would have happened anyways. This covered N20 abatement from nitric acid production and was also the only project type correctly supplied with the ERUs. So that's one of the metrics that they were using. JI is one of three carbon offset schemes accredited by the Kyoto Protocol, along with emissions trading and the Clean Development Mechanism. It allowed some 872 million ERUs to be issued by ex-Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact countries, according to around a third of UN accredited emission allowances. So it's saying that this thing that's basically completely corrupted handed out 872 million of these ERUs, which we read before are tons of CO2. So in ERU is accredited as a ton of a ton of CO2. So 872 million tons of CO2, most of which the credit was given falsely. So this is part of the whole why the hell are we doing these stupid swap things? Now, I googled swaps. Okay, it's changed it. When the first time I looked it up, AI overview said something about the swaps are really pretty much brand new. We don't know a ton about it, but here's a little bit about that. It stopped saying that at the front now. So it says methane to market partnerships is a public-private public-private partnership that aims to reduce methane emissions by recovering and using methane as a clean energy source. The partnership's goal are to improve air quality, blah blah blah. Okay, I mean, we know what swaps are. The point of a swap is efforts, global methane pledge, a pledge. Yeah, raise your right hand to promise. Methane Sat and Tanager 1 satellites launched. Oh, yeah, those are the ones that are going to. This is actually good because those are the ones they're sending up to actually look for major sources of methane that are coming out. So this is. They said it's going to be able to hold countries accountable and stuff. I think we all know that that's not going to mean anything. To me, the biggest the biggest win from that is we're going to know where a lot of the carbon's coming from because there's lots of reports now that there are a lot of ways that the carbon is being created and released from the earth itself that we're just now starting to discover, oh crap, there's like how much methane just kind of like hiding in there. So this will help out a lot in figuring out where a lot of those hot spots are that, whether by us or not, is basically under the earth and just being released and not necessarily being created through like industrial processes. So, International Methane Emissions Observatory. So I'm assuming they're probably in partnership with the satellites. Methane to Markets, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, U.S. government's Methane to Markets Partnership accomplishments. So now something that's 84 times the potency of carbon is now getting the oh so efficient carbon swap treatment. So yeah, that's great. So I looked this up because I was interested in seeing exactly how easy this would be. I wanted to look as if I was a company that thought, hey, this carbon offset thing's a deal, man. What if I started doing that and making just a ton of money? What exactly, is involved in this kind of thing? I didn't really find a step-by-step tutorial, which would be great. That would probably be a whole podcast all by itself. Although I didn't find it, so. But I think that this from carboncredits.com, as if that's not kind of telling, right? I think that this is a very informative little article here from them. So let's just read through this and see what this group is telling us about these offsets, right? Carbon offsets have proven to be a robust and financially lucrative market across Europe, Australia, and Canada. The EU, for instance, is aiming to reduce emissions by over 55% by 2030, with zero emissions by 2050, and that can only be achieved with the help of massive, it says massive, and it's in italics, carbon offset purchases. So this whole thing is designed to sell you A, on their worth, and B, on, hey, maybe you want to get in on this. I'm sure they have some sort of finder's fee associated that they get with you doing this scheme. So, and EU price of carbon allowances is more than 80 euros, I think that is. 80 euros a ton. And yet, a high quality carbon offset can be purchased for less than $10 a ton. Why is it talking about paying you 80 euros but buying it at $10? Weird. For corporations that need to decrease the impact of their emissions, buying verified, quote unquote, they didn't quote unquote, I'm quote unquoting it, carbon offsets is a no brainer. And that means huge income potential in the EU for people who quickly understand the market and how to use their land to produce offsets. Farmers, ranchers, and landowners can produce and sell carbon offsets. That's to say that farmers, ranchers, right? And landowners. In other words, you just gotta have like a home and some land on it. It might be a little trickier because there are some hurdles to get through. You got to get through some loops to kind of, quote unquote, prove that you're doing something. But this really kind of opens it up to just about anybody, even though it starts with farmers and ranchers, which is like, okay, yeah, agriculture, that's a big deal. They're high polluters. We need to get this under control. Having them as part of the system inherently makes sense. But then we're like, yeah, but also landowners, So, okay. They do this by using carbon farming and carbon sequestration processes, which involve implementing practices that remove CO2 from the atmosphere by converting that gas into organic matter within the soil and eventually in the plants. Once absorbed, the CO2 helps restore the soil's natural qualities, simultaneously enhancing crop production and reducing pollen. So, so a practice that removes CO2 from the atmosphere. It says by converting the gas. Oh, yeah, not converting. You're not really doing a conversion. The gas into organic matter. This is what plants do. This is literally just describing make sure your land has plants. If it has plants, you're doing carbon sequestration. Now, it's talking about like size a little bit and how what you have to do. I don't know if it's right here. I just remember reading through it somewhere. But yes, essentially, you'd have to do a lot of work to make it worth it if you were just simply a landowner. Having said that, if you don't sell the carbon swaps to make money, but have so little but still register as a carbon swap site, you can get a lot of money from somebody who just wants to use your land as part of a larger scheme and say, look at all this land that's part of the carbon swap, and they get a ton of money for it. And so you end up getting paid more to be a part of that than you do for the actual carbon swaps because of how much money they're making from the scheme of carbon swaps, where they're not actually doing anything. You see what I'm saying? Okay, in 2023, over 10 billion in carbon offsets were traded on the VCM. It doesn't say what the VCM is, but something carbon market, I imagine. Total carbon offset volume was more than 2,400 MTCO2E. I don't know what that is. It doesn't explain that. Probably if I read the whole article, I'm sure. I'm not doing that just to find that out, though. Simple math says the average price paid for a ton of carbon removed from the atmosphere in this manner was $4. Wow, wow, right? There is a wide variance, however, in the price paid for carbon offsets, depending on project quality, insurance year, verifiability, additional benefits created by carbon offset, and other factors. For live VCM pricing, please click here. Should we click there? Let's go ahead and click there. I just want to see what the heck it brings up. Trending right now. Live carbon process, European Union, UK. Australia, it's up. It's 9.85%. So in European Union, it's 63.30 euros. I don't know if that's per ton. It doesn't say what the exchange is. I'd assume it's per ton because that's how the credits are tabulated by the Kyoto Accord protocols. So I'm assuming it's $63 a ton right now, which is way more than four, right? In fact, there's nothing on here that says four. There's aviation industry, nature base, and tech base, and those are all under $1. So not good there. South Korea is $6. So still over four, but still not great. China is $97. So China, European Union, New Zealand at 63. Well, we're not even on here, so I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to get to that or not, but so yes, so governed by blah 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 blah, voluntary carbon features, nature based. Yeah, so the U.S. isn't even on that chart. I don't know if there's a reason for that or what, but there you go. Maybe because we have most of the people buying the carbon offsets. I honestly don't know. That's just a guess. It's probably a really bad one. So I was looking this up because it kept bringing it up, but I didn't end up running into it in the actual article. It was, what does GWP stand for? Because it kept bringing it up. It's global warming. Oh, you know what? I'm ahead of myself. That's what happened. GWP stands for global warming potential. So this is going to come up in the next thing I'm going to read. So yes. So the file is away under, coming up soon. So GWP, global warming potential. And the reason that's important is we're going to talk about on something called sustain.life 10 harmful greenhouse gases other than CO2. And it even starts with, did you know CO2 isn't the most potent greenhouse gas? Probably because it's not. So we're going to go, this article does not list them in order, but I'm going to list them in order from the least worst to the most worst. And this isn't, again, the least worst, period. This is the least worst on this top 10 list. So, okay. And it's funny because I was just watching I can't remember who it was, but it was a global. What was it? It was a com. It was something where somebody was trying to be funny, and they were. Oh, you know what it was? It was CinemaSins, and they just did the Chipmunks, the like live action one, holiday special, or maybe it's just a Chipmunks movie. I don't know what it was, but it was talking about them, and it was talking about something about breathing in the high or the helium to make your voice go up, and they were talking about like an anti chipmunk voice, and they mention what's actually the number one greenhouse gas on here. I'm assuming it has the property of lowering your voice, while as helium has the property of raising it. I'm assuming that's why they mention it, but it's just funny because it's just such a weird reference, and to have it as part of the thing that I'm talking about is just like nuts. Like, what are the chances, right? So I'm going to read you what they're. It's not okay. So they don't have this in the list of in order, right? So they have 10. This is their number one, but not as in the number one best or number one worst. It's kind of in a random order, even though they give the potentials in them, so you actually know what order they are. They for some reason decided not to do that. But we're talking about number one because it says that the global warming potential is yet to be formally quantified. And most of the research has shown that it is probably one of the worst. And I'm not going to really, or maybe I will, I don't know, read through all the descriptions to find out more about this stuff. It's really just like a paragraph under it, so maybe we'll read it. But yeah, this one, which is water vapor, is just all over the atmosphere and can be really troubling because it's already there, right? It's like, well, why aren't we already all dead then? If water vapor is all it takes to get global warming. No, water is not what it takes to get global warming. An overabundance of things in our atmosphere that contribute to global warming is what causes it, not because water's in there and it's a good global warming agent will automatically get global warming. So I'm sure most of you know that, but just to have that correction there. So water vapor, perhaps unsurprisingly, steam, aka water vapor, is the most abundant greenhouse gas on the planet. At one point, the IPCC stated that water vapor accounts for about 60% of the greenhouse effect. That figure might be skewed, though. When water vapor is released into the air, it tends to cause a false positive feedback loop. Its atmospheric levels increase as Earth becomes warm alongside the evaporation rate. The good news, water vapor only stays in the air for around 9 days before transforming into rain or snow. I mean, that's great, but the thing they're not mentioning is that more water vapor also gets created every day. So while it's raining and snowing every day somewhere, it's also, evaporating every day. So you don't just get to the, hey, we'll be gone 9 days and we'll all be good. Yeah, but it's still going up there at 9 days as well. So number two is methane with a global warming potential of 29.8. So methane is odorless and highly flammable and traps heat if released without burning. Common sources of methane come from animal rearing, namely cattle, which contributes significantly to climate change. Cattle production and other agricultural practices produce a quarter of anthropogenic methane emissions. Methane stays in the atmosphere for around 10 years. So that's 29 on the GWP, which is global warming potential, right? So the next one, I believe, is this, and that is ground level ozone. So not the stuff way up that we're trying to keep up there so it blocks the sun's radiation, we don't all get fried, right? This is ground level ozone. And it's 62 to 69 over a 20-year 20-year horizon. Not sure what that means. One of them's a period of time. One of them's the visible edge of the planet, perceptibly. I don't know. Anyways, ground level ozone is a highly irradiating gas that appears above Earth's surface and is created when nitrogen, oxygen, and volatile organic compounds react in stagnant air under sunlight. Approximately 95 nitrogen oxides from human activity originate from the burning of oil, gasoline, and coal. Human activity generates volatile organic compounds from solvents, evaporation, wood combustion, gas, oil, and production. Okay. So it appears over the Earth's above the Earth's surface, but then comes to the ground, I guess? Because then, other than mentioning it at the top, it never really said a whole lot about what that is. So, okay. What's next? So we're into the thousands now. We got 47, we got 46. So I think that... No, next we have 200. Okay. Number 3. Well, they're number 3. Nitrous oxide. Global warming potential of 273. If you've ever been to the dentist and used laughing gas, and you're familiar with this greenhouse gas, but did you know the colorless gas is also used in rocket fuel and aerosol? According to the IPCC, it stays in the atmosphere for 114 years. Whew. Okay, so now we're into the thousands here, and we're going with, obviously, 46,000. That's trichlorofluoromethane. Trichlorofluoromethane, a gas used as a coolant in refrigerators and to make foam in liquid fire extinguishers, deteriorates the global climate on two fronts. First, the gas produces chlorine molecules that deplete the ozone layer, and, you guessed it, it has a high GWP. Okay, okay. It doesn't say what second it was, but sure, okay. So that's a bad one. It's GWP 4,600. And remember, was it methane is 29. 29. And this is 4,600. So then we go to 4,780, and it's sulfur fluoride. Sulfur fluoride, a fumigant used to manage termites, was only identified as a greenhouse gas in 2009 by MIT scientists. This gas is highly inert and has an atmospheric lifetime of shelf life up to 40 years. The chemical occupies just 1.5 parts per trillion in the atmosphere, but that figure increases by 5% each year. So next we're going to perfluorotributyltamine. Okay. Its global warming potential is 7,100. After over 50 years of application in the electronics industry to cool CPUs and as an ingredient in artificial blood, this gas has recently hit the radar as a potential harmful greenhouse gas. While its concentration in the atmosphere is relatively low, about 0.2 parts per trillion, the gas can stay there for over 500 years. All right, so now we get into the 10,000s, and we get hexafluoroethane with a GWP of 12,200. It says, hexafluoroethane is a refrigerant used in semiconductor manufacturing, is the most stable of the greenhouse gases. While most gases stick around for hundreds of years, it stays for as many as 10,000 years. The longevity, combined with its high GWP, makes it one of the most dangerous greenhouse gases. Next we get triofluoromethane, also known as fluoroform. This gas has two uses: fire suppressants and silicon chip engraving. It is the most abundant hydrofluorocarbon with an atmospheric lifespan of 260 years. And then we hit our number one here with the GWP of 25,200. Remember that, methane was 29, and it is 84 times what, CO2 is. And here we've got, 25,200 in comparison. So, sulfur hexafluoride. Sulfur hexafluoride is used as an insulator in electronic power systems, the dispersal of chemical agents, and various scientific experiments. Good news for those that depend on the sulfur hexafluoride. Safer alternatives exist. While this gas contributes a smaller percentage to greenhouse emissions, the colorless and odorless gas is the most potent greenhouse gas and stays in the atmosphere for 3,200 years. So there we go. So that's, top 10 gases that are not CO2. And we already know that methane is 84 times more potent than CO2, so CO2 wouldn't even be on that top 10 list anyways. And water vapor is above CO2, and there's a lot more of that. The problem is, the warmer we make the planet, the more of that we get up there. So, again, it's the whole runaway train sort of scenario with global warming, aka climate change. So the problem, as we can see, is that this stuff is not good stuff. And I think that's probably kind of a duh thing at this point, right? So why are we talking about it? What's the whole point? I thought we were talking about this other thing. If we don't understand what the problem is, it's hard to understand why having a problem with it is a problem, if that makes any sense. If you don't know that carbon is just a horrible thing to have there because it's causing global warming, if we don't know that methane is even worse than that, if we don't know that there are other things even worse than that, because for a long time it was just about carbon, and on occasion you'd hear a little bit about methane. Methane would creep into the conversation. So these other things, depending on how we scale up, because a lot of this is, microchip kind of manufacturing. If we really scale that up, then some of this other stuff can also be scaled up and become more of a problem. And we need a whole hell of a lot less of it for it to become a serious problem. And the last thing we need is sulfur hexafluoride swaps. Because the whole point of this discussion really is to say carbon swaps, methane swaps, all these swaps are just a joke. Does it mean every single little teeny one has been a scam and nothing ever has been real? No, that is not what it means. That's the whole blanket statement theory that either everything is 100% good or everything is 100% bad. It's just not the way things work. Having said that, this is clearly more on the bad side. Like, even a little bit of this being a scam is a big problem when we're talking about the death of the planet. So the fact that a huge chunk of this is just fake, essentially, that's a big problem. So what we're seeing is that a lot of people are saying that we're a lot closer to our goals of trying to lower the emissions and get to a zero emissions planet. Yet when you look at the data the planet is giving, we aren't. And we're not getting anywhere close. And we're not even going in the right direction. So the problem is that it's not great, and the data isn't giving us the whole truth unless you're looking at the data from the Earth and what it's telling us, in which case that's not good. So next time you see somebody talking about swaps and whatnot, now you know, yeah, don't pay any attention to that. They're full of crap. I don't even know why you're bothering to do that. Do something actual worthwhile. And obviously we'll talk about some other stuff next time. But for now, I'll leave you with that. Will we survive our own apocalypse? Only time will tell.